Has the US followed Israel's lead on the war on Iran? Some say Tel Aviv and its powerful lobby in the US have forced President Donald Trump's hand to launch attacks against Tehran. The White House denies this, but with a senior-level resignation and conflicting statements from the administration, many are asking whose war Washington is really fighting. I'm Jafar Hasnan, and today's newsmaker is the Israeli lobby in the US. The impact of Israeli lobby groups on Washington is nothing new and hardly a secret. Yet, going to war on their behalf is something else. Last week, a senior U.S. intelligence official resigned, saying Iran posed no imminent threat to the U.S., and Donald Trump started the war due to pressure from Israel and its powerful American lobby. Trump maintains that Iran was a clear threat to the U.S., yet with himself and many people in his administration having strong ties to the Israeli lobby and government, many are still questioning the real motive behind all this. Here's a closer look.
The US-Israeli war on Iran has brought Jewish and Israeli lobby groups into the spotlight of American politics. The recent resignation of Joe Kent as the director of the National Counterterrorism Center, which was posted on X, appeared to point the finger squarely at Israeli lobbyists in Washington. Mr. Kent said Iran posed no imminent threat to America and accused Israel's powerful American lobby, saying that pressure from lobbyists engaged in high-level misinformation campaigns had undermined the Trump administration's America First agenda and had successfully persuaded it to go to war with Iran. The US President, Donald Trump, when questioned by reporters, denied this.
I didn't know him well, but I thought he seemed like a pretty nice guy. But when I read his statement, I realized that it's a good thing that he's out, because he said that Iran was not a threat. Iran was a threat.
In American politics, money talks. Miriam Adelson is one of Trump's top backers. She's a Tel Aviv-born Jewish-American physician and widow of a casino billionaire with ties to Netanyahu. She donated well over $100 million to pro-Trump and anti-Kamala Harris efforts in the 2024 election. That figure rises closer to $250 million when factoring in all three Trump presidential campaigns. She might be the most prominent example of an individual donor, but lobbying is not about one person or group. It's a constellation of individuals and organizations that shape and drive issues across American society. Lobbying itself is not illegal, and proponents say it's the manifestation of people engaging in a democratic society and advocating for policies and issues of interest. But Israeli lobbies are notoriously well-funded and organized. Critics argue that Israeli lobbies in the US wield significant and even disproportionate influence and have managed to bend the ear of American administrations in the Middle East for decades.
And today you have a situation where presidents are extremely reluctant to take on the lobby, and presidential candidates are unwilling to criticize Israel and indeed go to great lengths to compete among themselves to show their allegiance to Israel.
Among the major Jewish American lobby groups, none is more prominent than AIPAC, which regularly funnels money to Congress, congressional candidates, and presidential campaigns. Sites like Track AIPAC track how much money members of Congress and people in the administration receive from pro-Israeli groups. Vice President J.D. Vance, U.S. National Security Advisor Michael Waltz, and Secretary of State Marco Rubio all get mentions. Rubio is reported to have received over $1 million from AIPAC and other Jewish lobby groups. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has long seen Iran as a security threat, and in 2026, with coordinated American support, he realized his goal of striking Tehran. In the days after the war was launched, Rubio affirmed Washington's support for his closest ally in the Middle East.
And so the president made the very wise decision. We knew that there was going to be an Israeli action. We knew that that would precipitate an attack against American forces. And we knew that if we didn't preemptively go after them before they launched those attacks, we would suffer higher casualties and perhaps even higher those killed.
He later tried to walk back that statement, aware that it seemed to suggest Israel's attack on Iran forced the US's hand in joining the war. As the conflict nears 1 month, the US's involvement is widely seen as a strategic miscalculation, and ironic, given that Trump campaigned against America fighting for other nations.
And joining me now from the Iranian capital is research fellow at the University of Tehran, Mohammad Eslami. Mohammad, good to have you here with us on the Newsmakers. So, first and foremost, from Tehran's perspective, is there evidence that U.S. decisions can be externally shaped at critical moments, or is this war still fundamentally a U.S.-driven decision where Israeli interests align closely with Washington?
Okay, first of all, thank you so much for having me on the program. You know that every country's foreign policy comes from their domestic politics and their internal issues. So the same is for the United States. But the point about the United States, and exactly when we are talking about President Trump, is about his intentions regarding the interests of the American people or the interests of the other countries' lobbyists in the United States, especially talking about the Israelis in the United States. From the Iranian point of view, we are watching everything that other countries are right now watching regarding the United States. Donald Trump is a kind of collateral punishment for not only Iran, but also Saudis, Bahrainis, Emiratis, NATO members, and every other countries, also Asian economies. All of them are under collateral punishment by the United States and exactly by the Donald Trump. And when you see what's going on and what has published by, for example, Epstein files, it's crystal clear that there are many things regarding the manipulation of the American domestic politics and American foreign policy by the Israeli lobbies and by the Mossad agents in the United States. It is nothing to be hidden in the United States. And right now we are watching that Senator Ted Cruz and every other persons are proudly talking about the interest of the Israelis, not the interest of the American people. So it is very clear that they are being manipulated by the Israelis.
Mohammed, you have said before, I went through your pre-interview notes, and you have said before that Iran studies U.S. politics very closely. So does Tehran believe it has a clear understanding of how decisions are made in Washington, or does the complexity of the system, of the U.S. system, actually make Washington's behavior harder to predict?
From the Iranians, for the Iranians, there are lots of sources to be studied. For example, thinking and studying the American think tanks, for example, policymakers around, out of the administration, but also about the American administration, Trump administration, talking about Secretary of State, the Ministry of War, and something like this. But one of the important things about this administration is that the current American president doesn't care about the policy-making process inside the U.S. Yes, we Iranians are day by day following what's going on in the U.S. in terms of lots of think tanks, Republican think tanks, Democrats think tanks, and so many other sources like medias and something like this. But you know that right now this establishment, this administration doesn't care about their internal process of decision making. And Donald Trump himself is proudly talking about following his instincts rather than thinking about the complicated process of decision making in the United States. Yes, every Iranian diplomat, every Iranian researcher in terms of foreign policy starts his career or starts his way with studying what's going on in the United States, so many institutions, so many, decision-making processes. But right now, it's like kind of chaos in Washington, D.C. right now.
Mohammed Eslami, thanks very much for joining us today here on the Newsmakers. And joining me now from Washington is Chairperson of Republican Overseas UK, Greg Swenson. From London, we have Senior Consulting Fellow at Chatham House, Yossi Mekelberg. And from New York, writer and commentator Jennifer Koonings. Great to have you all here on the Newsmakers today. Greg, let me begin with you. Let me put this to you directly, because this is the concern being raised by many across the region and, frankly, across the world. We have reporting from multiple news outlets, including Reuters, that Benjamin Netanyahu made a last-minute case to President Donald Trump, and that may have been a catalyst for military action. And at the same time, we are told that U.S. decisions are based purely on national interest. So how do you reconcile those two things? And why does it look like, at least from the outside, that a foreign leader can influence the timing of U.S. military action?
Yeah, I think, two things can be true at the same time. There's no doubt that the timing, not necessarily the decision to move forward, but the timing of it was definitely influenced by Netanyahu and the Israelis, because of the fact that much of the leadership of the regime was gathered, for a meeting on a Saturday morning. And so, that's the timing. Look, there's no secret that the troops and ships were moving, or especially ships, were moving to the Gulf. And that was a decision that the president made, partly because he wanted to influence the negotiations, the diplomacy, but felt like, we had to have some assets in the region in case diplomacy didn't work out. But I do think that it was more the timing of the strike. If it wasn't that Saturday morning, it would have been a few days later. The president had been very clear about his 2-week ultimatum to get some sort of agreement made. And so he, as usual, he doesn't telegraph too much. He didn't want to tell them exactly when he was going to strike. And I think there's, we have to remember that element of surprise. Having those coordinated strikes on that first day was really compelling.
Yossi, you have made the distinction between lobbying and state-to-state coordination. But when you look at moments like this, where Israeli urgency appears to precede U.S. action, let me ask you, how would you convince skeptics that this is coordination and not a situation where a foreign state is effectively shaping the timing of U.S. policy?
Is there coordination? Probably yes, or definitely yes. Does Netanyahu has influence on some parts of American politics, including Trump? It seems that this is the case. Whether it serves either American interests or Israeli interests in many cases, again, I'm not so sure about it. And I think, we have to look at the role of lobbies in the United States. And like many other countries, lobbies are part of the system, of the political system. They are way more powerful lobbies than the Israeli lobbies. Does it really, again, works for the United States? I think lobbies create distortions on so many ways, whether it is the pharmaceutical or the arm industry, and now AI, social media. They create distortion because at the end of the day, those who have capable lobbies and can enter into this discourse have more influence at the expense of others. But again, at the same time, yeah, there are discussion, there are strategic coordination between the United States and Israel. But I think there is a strong element of exaggeration to think that even Netanyahu can go basically and tell Trump what to do.
But Yossi, as I understand, there is a degree of influence that Netanyahu has on Donald Trump. So based on that, because under the war powers framework and constitutional expectation in the U.S., decisions of war are supposed to be grounded in U.S. national interests and oversight. So if external influence plays a role, Netanyahu played a role, doesn't that raise legitimate concerns?
But between what constitutionally and so at the end of the day, Every leader needs to take a decision according to the national interest. I mean, but it's right. They get it many times wrong. I mean, Netanyahu is supposed to take decision uh, for what's best for the Israeli interests, and I haven't seen it for many years. I think what Netanyahu is doing goes against the national interest, whether it's domestically or internationally. I think he's causing huge harm to Israel on so many levels. The same I think about Donald Trump. Is this the president probably that Americans wish for? Probably not. But the kind of discussions and what influence a certain president, that's a good question. Why? I think actually at the end of the day, the problem is with Trump. If Netanyahu has so much influence on Donald Trump, I think the American political system has a huge problem.
Jennifer, let me come to you now. You have argued that the influence of pro-Israel networks goes beyond traditional lobbying, but I want to be precise here with you. Are you saying that a foreign country is directly dictating U.S. foreign policy, or would you say that influence operates through political, financial, and institutional channels inside the U.S.?
Well, my view is that you can't separate Israel and the United States at this point. Their interests, their so-called national interests, are completely in line with one another. National interests for the United States of America are corporate interests. The American political establishment is essentially a front for U.S. corporation in their money-making operations and ventures. And yes, the Zionist lobby goes way beyond just the 501c3s, tax-exempt corporations like AIPAC and J Street. They've completely been infused within the tech industry, within the media establishment, within the healthcare industry, within the education industry in this country. And they're all in line with Zionist interests. And the Trump administration is such a great illustration of how the Zionist interests have been completely fused within the United States of America. It was never America first for Donald Trump. And all of his policies are being influenced by the Zionist billionaires that have funded him. And Donald Trump is a Zionist billionaire himself. He is completely in line with the Zionist agenda. His family and his father were ardent Zionists. They were investing in colonizing Palestine, at least from the 1980s. His father was close to Benjamin Netanyahu as well. And they're New York real estate. So this was always the agenda. I think that Donald Trump is one of the most effective psychological operations that there have been in this country, convincing conservatives and the Republicans, the people, that he was going to be fighting for their interests. Well, he wasn't. And with this latest campaign, with this latest genocidal and suicidal campaign on Iran, but also, the policies that he's extended in Palestine, it's been, the mask is completely off at this point. This Trump administration is just about making money. And to Mohammed's first point, the strategy is chaos. Yes, they're profiting off of this chaos and disaster capitalism. So that, to me, is at the root of what's going on here.
Greg, let's talk about sovereignty in decision making. And obviously, I think Jennifer raised an interesting point there about Donald Trump launching this war, despite the fact Trump, during his presidential election campaign, promised on multiple occasions that he's not going to be launching any new wars. And right now, according to multiple polls within the United States, the majority of the American public is against this foreign entanglement. So the U.S. has the largest intelligence apparatus in the world right now. It has independent military assessments, its own strategic doctrine, as many would say. And yet, repeatedly, we see U.S. policy moving in parallel with Israeli priorities, whether on Iran, on Gaza, or regional escalation. So the question is, who is setting the tempo here, Greg? Is Washington leading or reacting?
Oh, without a doubt, it's Washington, but also consider that the existential threat is more serious for Israel. That's obviously quite apparent because of the location and the fact that the regime, the mullahs, have been talking about the elimination of Israel for years, as long as they've been in power since 1979. They've also been, yelling "death to America" and other absurd comments. So, look, this is not a regime that anybody likes, and you see that with the support that the U.S. is getting from around the world. I don't think there's any great conspiracy that the U.S. and Israel have been aligned since the beginning of Israel, and I think you probably saw more support from the Democrats for Israel generations ago. That's waned in the last few years with this, the advancement of this kind of radical progressive left, pro-Hamas, pro-Palestine crowd. But I don't think the relationship between Israel and the United States is any different than it was a generation ago. And the president, the difference is that every president and every politician or notable politician, right and left, for years has been saying that Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. Iran is a great threat to the region. But this president was the only one willing to act on it. Does he love war? Of course not. And I think that's why, he's looking for an off-ramp. He doesn't want to continue this thing indefinitely. He's not going to have a forever war. That's frustrating to some of the critics on the right who think this is the time to eliminate the regime and have positive regime change. And the great majority, some arguing 90% of Iranian people, are thrilled with what's happening with Israel and the U.S. In fact, they're disappointed when there's a slowdown in the attack. So, I think this is not new. This is not driven by President Trump's Zionism or all these other sort of code words like colonizing Palestine and corporate interests and all that. That's not new. There's always corporate influence in Washington. That's, we're capitalists, and that's definitely not new. So the president is making decisions. War is rarely popular in the United States. It's still supported significantly along partisan lines, and that's unfortunate, but that's the way things have moved in the
Greg,
last
if I may, no, that was not the
15
case
years where,
in Iraq, for example.
80, sure.
That was not the case
Yeah,
when
that's
the
what I
U.S.
was
went to
getting
Iraq,
to.
right?
In Iraq,
It's different this time around.
You're right. You're absolutely right. It is. It really is. And I think that's because everything now in America is on partisan lines. There are issues where there's 80% popular support, yet the Democrats say that that they won't agree with something. They're supporting men playing in women's sports, for example. That's an 80-20 issue. Okay. This one is split on partisan lines. Okay. 80% of Republicans are supporting it, and only 20% of Democrats. Yeah.
Jennifer, I saw you shaking your head there. Would you like to respond to this?
Well, I mean, there's so much to say, and Donald Trump and this regime, the American regime, have kind of laid out this crazy strategy in some part at this point, that they're going after Iran's nuclear program. Number one, number two, they pointed out the 1979 Islamic Revolution as, a reason to genocide the Iranian people. And number three, they've made the claim that we're going over there to give the Iranian people women's rights. So let me respond on all three of those points. The United States of America has over 5,000 nuclear weapons, and Israel has over 300 nuclear weapons. Which country in the world is the only country that has dropped nuclear bombs on foreign people? The United States of America. They've done it twice. Iran doesn't have a nuclear weapon. They have a nuclear program. And that's the reason why the United States of America want to take them out. They don't stand any of these countries that are self-sufficient and are sovereign. They want these countries to be subservient to them. The nuclear program in Iran is essential to their pharmaceutical program, for energy purposes, for industrial applications, for industry. They can't stand that. Number two, about the 1979 revolution. So you're essentially saying that you believe the Iranian people don't have the right to self-determination. And your claim that the Iranian people are begging for the United States of America to drop bombs on them. Let me finish. It's disgusting and dehumanizing beyond belief. You think the Iranian people are cheering the United States of America dropping bombs on girls' schools and killing 179 little schoolgirls with American weapons, a double top strike? You think that they're cheering for that? Number three, you think the United States of America is bringing women's rights to any country we don't have women's rights here. And I'll give 3 examples to point that out. Number 1, the maternal mortality rate in this country is worse than in Iran. Number 2, we don't have paid maternity leave here. We do not care for women in that way. The greatest thing that a woman can do for her country, for her family, to give life, to give birth to children. This country does not support them. And number 3, the number 1 reason for pregnant women to die in the United States of America is by homicide. Okay? So do you think that the United States of America is going to Iran or any other country that we've genocided to give them women's rights? No, we're not. So all of these claims are just, to the facts of what's happening. It's preposterous that you think that this is in the American people's interest to spend over $30 billion to drop bombs on Iran. It's just preposterous.
Okay, Yossi, let me come to you now. Greg, I know you want to respond, but first I have to go to Yossi. So, Yossi, I mean, based on what we have been discussing over the past 20 minutes now, if the U.S. Were seen to be influenced, even partially, let's say, by another country in decisions of war, would that be considered acceptable within the U.S. system, or would you say that would be viewed as a problem of accountability? Because ultimately, these decisions have global consequences, as we are witnessing.
Well, I mean, there is so much criticism that we can level against Donald Trump. But to assume that, the entire country was hijacked by Israel, I think this is far-fetched. Is there influence? Yes. There's Netanyahu thing where probably
but
too much
Yossi,
influence,
I mean, if I may interject very quickly there, if I may, I mean, obviously the kind of access Israel has, for example, to the White House is unprecedented, is it not? I mean, Netanyahu visited the White House more than 7 times since Donald Trump returned to the White House. That's unprecedented for any foreign leader.
You have to ask, Donald Trump or others, why, again, in my opinion, the most harmful person to Israel right now is Benjamin Netanyahu. He's the main risk for Israel on so many levels that we can have another program on this. But at the same time, to think that they're in control, he has influence. Why? He has more influence. I have my suspicion, which is not necessarily what one of the previous speakers tried to say, which has a quite unpleasant subtext. I think it's because Trump appreciates what he sees as strong people and those who are ready to use military power. Unlike, for instance, this is his unsubstantiated criticism of many European leaders, for instance.
Okay, gentlemen and Jennifer, unfortunately, we are out of time. Thanks all for joining us on this episode of The Newsmakers, and thank you for watching. You can follow us on social media and be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. I'm Jafar Hasnan. See you next time.